Hi everyone, and welcome back to the channel. This is Dave with Return to the Vintage. If you're new to the channel, I am a reseller of vintage and antique items, and I sell specifically on eBay. Now, each year I like to look back at the prior year's sales and see if there were any huge wins, if there were any trends I should look out for, things, maybe sales that I didn't think would go as well as expected, and then always just laughing and loving some of the sales I still can't believe sold for as much as they did. So today I'm going to take you back, show you some of the individual items from 2025, hopefully give you some advice, give you some guidance from my own personal experiences, and I hope you enjoy it as well. So let's go. All right, so here we are in my eBay store. So today I'm going to walk through some of the items I'd sold this past year. Note that I don't have any of the information of the buyer or any contact information here. These are all just from my records, so I can get a chance to show you some of these past purchases, but I want to make sure I protect their confidentiality. So the first item I wanted to show you here, it's an antique builder's plate. About 3 months ago, I bought a large collection of these little plates that would go on cars, or there were like radiator badges. There were about 70 of them, and they were actually attached to a large display on a wall, and they were all actually glued on inside this glass display. And I bought 70 of them, and the price was like about $700. So it was paying up for it, but knowing that I'd be able to take these 70 smaller items and part them out, and hopefully in selling them individually, at least 2x, maybe 3x my money. And I just checked my total right now over the last 3 months for this is $2,146. So I'm definitely, well beyond where I'd want to be. But ultimately, this is just an example. As you look at some of these items that you might find or come across, consider first of all buying a larger collection and then parting them out individually, or just keep an eye out for these smaller type items. They can be reproduced, but I would just keep an eye out and see, if you can find ones like this or similar. I've sold so many of them so far, but just kind of a good example I thought to share. Now, some of these are going to be a little bit more detailed like this, unfortunately, because it's a further purchase, so I can't give you too much specific detail. But this is just an example of one of my go-tos for selling each year. They'll always sell as G.I. Joe, Transformers, kind of Star Wars. Those are like my top three that I always go to. But this is just an example. It was a Sky Striker from 1983, but it sold for $159. But this is just like one of those that if you're out there, you don't need to always necessarily find these G.I. Joes or these Star Wars boxed or carded. You can find them individually and still have just as much success. But really, this is like my niche, my go-to. If I can find these types of items, could sell them over and over again. Sometimes they'll sit a little bit longer if I price them higher, but still just great finds and something I always would recommend keeping an eye out for. This is a unique example, kind of like along the lines of I didn't realize this actually was a thing, but also something to consider when you think about the long term of buying a collection and then parting it out into individual pieces. So the GI Joe that I'd shown you, the Sky Striker prior, was part of a larger collection that I purchased of individual action figures as well as vehicles. And when I was going through everything, I realized that this tow cable, when I did my research, is actually $60. It blew my mind, but it kind of goes to the example that you're not going to necessarily go to a yard sale and look for this specifically, but just think as you're going through all these different items and what you can find, that there could be even hidden value. The vehicle that this goes on is not even half as expensive. It's more this individual piece that people are looking for that either they've lost or is broken from their current vehicle. So just kind of like an example of, certainly if you see it, that's great, but it's so hard to identify. But just if you have a larger collection that you find, to part them out and to see if there's value in the individual accessories. So this next one of the largest recommendations is when you're out looking for these skillets, Griswold is always the brand to look for. There's lots of reproductions, there's lots of different names that are out there. Griswold, the originals are always the ones that will bring in the money. But This is a reminder that it's not just the Griswolds. This was a Wagnerware 1219, super rare, but I came across, I was actually looking and hoping it was going to be a Griswold, but I saw on the back what it was, and I just realized, oh shoot, this is another one to keep an eye out for in the future. Is don't just get single-minded thinking, I need to go and I need to find a Griswold, and that's the only thing that's going to be expensive. No, this sold for $275. So if you're out, definitely looking for Griswolds, but Griswolds, if you find them in an antique store, or if you buy them sometimes from yard sales, people will know their value. Usually they're overpriced, but take a look and understand that there are some others that have value outside of that specific name brand. Certainly, there's a lot of others that have no value at all, but just a kind of a nice little win, something to remind myself, to keep an eye out for others outside of just the Griswolds. So this is one that I thought to show, just because. Oh, I'll bring this. So this is one I thought to show. I'll cover up this top here. This is something I thought to show. I don't know if anyone else has had as much success as I have, but plate toppers sell so well and all the time. Plate toppers like this one, I've sold ones that are from, like, I sold one that was like Miami. I sold one that was like a Florida plate topper. I sold a couple that are like just complete one-offs, and I don't even know where ultimately this came from, but an antique yacht club plate topper is just incredible to find something like this. And so I would say whenever you're out and about, if you do find any plate toppers that look like this or are long, this is probably for, I don't know, like maybe a motorcycle or something smaller. But if you find the ones that are larger for a license plate, always pick them up. They're always going to bring you in some money. This one brought in 90, but definitely a go-to, or be on the lookout, or a bolo for sure. This is kind of like my go-to here. Ultimately, I always love selling metal vintage signs. So this was one that I was fortunate to find this past year. It's a beautiful Chevron credit cards, gas and oil sign. You don't come across them all the time. It's rare that I find a large collection. I'll find one here and there. I was lucky to find this one. I sold it for 400. I did pay up. I paid, I think, $150 for it. So I didn't make like a huge, I think I 2x'd it, but didn't make a huge profit off it. But I also just really love selling them as well. So this was just one that I was able to track down and find and was able to sell. I think if you come across anything that's like this, again, watch out for repros. If you look on the outside, there's some nice rusting, and you could tell there's some nice kind of scarring here and some patina. Certainly keep an eye out for those. You don't want to find anything with like completely perfect circles or straight lines, but definitely if you keep an eye out for anything like this that's a metal sign, it's always a winner for me. Wanted to show that one. So this is kind of like a unique example that if you go to so a lot of times people will go to antique stores, and everywhere in antique stores, you're going to find all types of tin. You're going to find coffee tins. You're going to find um, like chocolate tins. You're going to find all types of tins, and most of them are not worth anything. Even tobacco tins, most of them are barely worth anything. If you see marshmallows, buy. Every time I buy one that's marshmallows like this one, they always sell. For some reason, I'm not sure why, but this one's a little bit of a bigger one, so 5-pound tin. But if you see anything, even the smaller ones that are for marshmallows, always keep an eye out. This one sold for 161. I bought it for $20 at an estate sale. But again, when you're out, look for marshmallows of all things. I know it's kind of odd, but look for those marshmallows. They'll always be sellers, every one of them. So this is in the world of, I can't believe how much this sold for. I like to always have one of those each year. And this is one that just blew my mind. Like, I couldn't believe it. I when I did my research for it, I was like, okay, well, I do have to pay up a little bit for it. So I paid $100 for it. And I can't believe I paid $100 for a toy like this. But I did my research. I did my research. And I was like, this is going to sell for like a lot of money. I was thinking $500, but sold for $699 and got positive feedback. The person absolutely loved it. And this is, it's in box, it's fairly sealed, but most of these brats they'll sell. I had never been in this category before, but I guess most of them will sell. This just happens to be one that's like the premium above all others. So this was one this past year that was I just couldn't believe it. And you learn and you move on and keep an eye out for the same thing. But I just thought it was great to share. So this one I would say falls within my probably my favorite, if not my top three finds of the year. So this is it's a ashtray. It's it's shell cartridge trench art. So essentially, if you could see the pieces that put this together, these were created most likely, I thought, during like World War II to create this ashtray with a kind of a metal plane on top. And I just thought it was the coolest thing I'd seen. And I paid $10 for it because I thought it was cool and had no clue what it was actually worth. But it was super, super heavy, but definitely unique. I ended up selling it for $200. So certainly you're not going to come across with trench art. You're really not going to come across pretty much the same thing twice. You're going to come across a lot of things that look similar, but this was one that I just thought I just had to grab, and I'm really happy I did. And it was kind of a neat purchase for this past year and a great sale. And one of the unique things, see, if you look here, you can see it says Australia. These are actually coins that were melted into those spots to hold a cigarette or a cigar. So just really cool. So, certainly trench art, it's difficult because it's hard to understand what's going to sell and what's not going to sell. It's kind of similar to like folk art, but the ones that are just really unique and maybe catch your eye might sell for more. It's just kind of the case with me. And then my last one here, this was just my best, I guess my best purchase overall for the year. This is an antique Mexican retablo, a kind of a tin folk art painting. So I found a bunch of these, and I paid $10-15 for each. Just I had no clue. I just knew it was Retablo, and Retablo is not a specific artist, but it's like a kind of, I guess, a grouping of artwork that's folk art. And again, folk art, it's a toss up. There's just no way to know if it's going to sell or not sell. So I paid and I found a bunch of them, and I just really lucked out with this. This one was 824.87. But the others I still have, and they're still listed for $600-700 or so. But this is just I guess my big one of the year. Something that is difficult to replicate. I'll probably never find Retablos in this condition with this type of a collection for that much money as I bought and will sell them for. But I always like to also celebrate some of those wins throughout the year. Well, I hope you enjoyed that quick trip through some of my items that were sold this past year in 2025. And hopefully, you got some good information relative to some items to keep an eye out for, what's kind of worked for me, and hopefully also, some of those be on the lookout for or bolo items as you're out at garage sales and yard sales. So, if you have any questions about anything that we covered or just any questions overall in the world of vintage and antique reselling, feel free to drop them in the comments below. And as always, I'd certainly appreciate a follow. And if you have any other content ideas, feel free to drop those as well, as I'm happy to share any advice from my personal experience. So, till next time, thank you so much and I appreciate your time.